For the vast majority of my gaming career, I've only been a Nintendo and PlayStation gamer. And I've played a lot of games, particularly JRPGs for those systems, ranging from Super Nintendo and PS1 to Switch and PS4. However, very recently, I decided to finally start exploring Xbox consoles and the game libraries for them. And as part of that effort, I got a cheap Xbox 360 and this game, Lost Odyssey, which used to be, one of the exclusives on the system that people often raved about, talked about as making the 360 worth owning. I just had to experience Lost Odyssey, and I'll be honest, at first I didn't like it. At first, the game put me off a little bit for various reasons I'll get into. But in the end, I stuck with playing it, and I played it to the end. I sunk about 80 hours into it, beat the game, and I want to talk about it, I want to review it, because this game taught me an important lesson, which is that even when a game is unappealing to you for multiple reasons, if it has enough other reasons to like it, it can still be worth playing and still treat you to a good time. So let's get into it. Now, Lost Odyssey is a game that I found to feel both familiar and traditional, and unique and quirky and original as well. It has a good mix of those traits. So the setting reminds me of Final Fantasy VII and VIII quite a bit. It's got magic and advanced technology mixed together with medieval weapons of death, that sort of thing. And it's a fun, fantastical world, in the same way those Final Fantasy games are, with colorful characters that are a little stereotypical, but the characters in this game, they stand out enough to keep one interested, I feel. Now, the story begins in a world that's at war. There are 2 or 3 nations that don't seem to get along that well, and the immortal character you play as, Kaim, seems to be involved in this war. He also seems to have a case of amnesia, which I know is a bit of an overdone trope in stories of JRPGs, but he has amnesia, and as the game goes on, that's used as a plot device to help you figure out what's going on in this world, give you motivation to explore, unravel evil things that are afoot, and it's used well enough. It's used effectively to propel you through the game, and character relationships are compelling enough to make one want to see what exactly is going on in this world. I don't want to spoil anything too much, but your main character you start as is immortal, multiple party members are immortal, and the villain of the game has an interesting relationship to them. That's all I'm going to say. It does end up being kind of a typical save the world sort of story, but with enough twists to make it interesting.
I've got an idea.
I haven't seen too many other games dabble with immortality as a theme, and that appeals to me because I think immortality is pretty interesting. The immortality is used both as a device for storytelling, and it has practical implications for the battles. So if your immortal characters are defeated, in another turn or 2 after they go down, they'll revive automatically. And you only get a game over if a specific character who isn't supposed to die dies, or if all your characters go down at the same time. That's how they handle that. Now let's get into gameplay mechanics, beginning with the battle system. So, the best place to start is probably going to be differentiating between your mortal characters and your immortal characters, because they each work pretty differently. So, your mortal characters are basically your set character builds in this game, and your immortal characters are more clean slates for you to customize and decide what they want to be. And it turns out that your immortal characters use your mortal characters to learn their skills through something called skill links. So skills in this game confer a lot of different abilities. They can give your character a specific kind of magic, the ability to use that magic, or they might just improve a stat a bit. And each mortal character in your party has access to a specific suite of abilities, skills, that they can then confer onto the immortal characters by skill linking. Skill linking is this thing where your immortal character will link to a skill a mortal character has, and then get access to that skill and eventually learn it through battle experience. It sounds complicated, but it's intuitive enough and easy enough to learn. Now, in terms of actions in battle, it's pretty expected stuff for a JRPG. You have your traditional just melee attack available to you, which uses something called a ring system to add little time-based trigger pressing to increase damage, something kind of similar to Super Mario RPG or something equivalent. And also you can just do things like defend or flee battle, steal if your character can steal, and then there's also magic. And magic comes in a few different forms. There's black magic, which includes all the elemental stuff, your water and your fire spells. That's pretty common in JRPGs, having those sorts of things. Then there's also white magic, which that involves like healing spells mainly. And spirit magic, which is more niche, but I think the spirit magic mainly has some spells for powering up your party members or powering down opponents. I didn't mess with it too much, but it had its place. Regarding equipable gear, there aren't too many things you have to worry about equipping. For each party member, it's just a weapon, a ring, and an accessory that you can equip. Weapon's the simplest of all. That's just what controls your party, your character's overall damage they do with their simple melee attacks. Rings are interesting in that they can be assembled from components or ingredients you find throughout the game world, and there are a lot of different rings that you can acquire just by buying them from shops or assembling them. I tried assembling a few different rings, but I only scratched the surface of the depth of that system. There are a ton of different rings you can create. So accessories can confer abilities as well, and those can grant access to a skill immediately for whoever equips them, but your immortal characters are going to be unique in that only they can permanently learn skills from accessories they equip. And similar to the skill linking with mortal characters, they get that experience just through battle. There are really a mind-boggling number of the rings that you can equip in this game. Really almost too many. It's almost overwhelming by the end of the game. But they are very useful. They give your characters significant damage bonuses. As I played Lost Odyssey, it became clear that this is not a game you want to level grind through. It's definitely a game that forces the player to learn its mechanics and puts strict level caps on experience gain in a given area. It'll be very hard to level up beyond the level of the enemies you're fighting. And I think I understand why the game designers did that. It's to make you learn the mechanics and not try to cheat your way through the game by just being ultra powerful. And I did have to learn the mechanics. and I got a few game overs, but it taught me how to play the game, so I can't complain too much. If you don't learn this game's systems, you're probably going to have a very hard time beating it, because all the little bonuses and improvements and enhancements to your characters that you'll gain by using its systems, they really do make a big difference. All that skill linking and using rings and whatnot, it contributes to your success. Now I do want to address exploration in Lost Odyssey, because the way it's handled is a little bit strange and unusual in this game. In the early parts of the game, say the first 2-3 discs or so, you won't really have any exploration on an overworld. It's mainly just picking a location from a menu and in linear fashion, selecting it and going to it instantly. However, once you get later in the game, it does open up in a sense, in that you will be free to explore on the seas. You can freely move about on the oceans in a vessel, and even go underneath the sea, and eventually fly a little bit. But as soon as you land, as soon as you're on the mainland, for some reason it goes back to that menu. And you'll go from your overworld exploration at sea, where it's free, to being on land and being kind of just trapped in that menu navigation, which is not as immersive and not as good in my eyes. I like games like Final Fantasy VII or Golden Sun, where you got a massive world to explore and you can traverse the world totally. But I do have to give the game credit, because the sea exploration you can do is pretty cool, and I haven't really played too many other games that let you go under the waves, and you can do a few cool things to discover locations by using your undersea capabilities. Now, the environments you do explore, the field maps of cities and dungeons, those do look pretty good. The environments were very pretty. There are a lot of very pretty environments in this game. There's a good variety, too. In the places you visit, you'll find caves and forests, also snowy places, and some sprawling cities, and not every place is just a linear corridor. There's a good amount of branching environments, maze-like environments. There's a good feeling of exploration throughout those environments that you can travel in. I want to make a little note on how exploration of the environments in Lost Odyssey feels, because it's not perfect, although it's functional. And what I mean by that is, Kaim kind of controls like a truck. Like, he's not good at turning on a dime. So whenever you try to turn around, it's sort of like maneuvering a large truck with a poor turning radius. You kind of can't turn quickly. He has to sort of have some room to maneuver. So just note that. Kaim isn't the most maneuverable vehicle to explore these environments, but he gets the job done. Like a truck. As you explore the environments, if you're thorough, you can find items hiding here and there, some of them in chests, some of them in other containers, like cans. I had fun kicking the contents out of cans. That was a great little animation. Now, whenever I play a game, I always do so without any kind of guidance, so I never use the internet to look up walkthroughs or hints of any sort, because it's important to me to be able to play through a game just with my own intelligence, just with my own wits. And if a game is so cryptic that I can't do that, often it's a sign of bad game design. Like, your game shouldn't be that cryptic. And so how did Lost Odyssey do? Well, I did play through the game and beat it pretty much without any guidance. There was only one little spot in the entire game where I got a little stuck. And it was this ridiculous problem I had where I was supposed to steal an item from these just normal enemies that you come across through random encounters, just a normal battle. And I was supposed to use the steal skill on them to steal the item I needed to proceed, and steal multiple of them, I believe. And yet, when you steal from them, the success rate for stealing that item is not 100%, so I tried a few times as I was experimenting, trying to figure out what to do in this area to get the item, and failed, and concluded I couldn't get items from these enemies. So that was a little annoying to me. Like, they should have just made the steal success 100% if the item was required to proceed through the game, in my opinion. But it was one little part of the game, so I kind of forgive Lost Odyssey overall, and the rest of the game was not too cryptic to proceed through. As part of its gameplay diversity, Lost Odyssey also offers something that some people may not like so much, which are QuickTime events. Now, I found the QuickTime events in this game very hit or miss. Things like making me light multiple torches of people in a ceremony. It just wasn't that interesting. It was kind of boring after the first one, and I struggled, by the way, to light those damn torches, and that was a little bit of a pain. Tedious, sort of monotonous, boring tasks that are hard to complete as well, because it's hard to hold the torch in the right spot.
I've tried
you know, those don't make a game that much better.
Fucking torch.
And after the first one, it was like, come on, I'm lighting the torches of 4 people, am I getting paid for this? Is this a part-time job?
This is where my patience ends.
Am I a torch lighter now? I do have to compliment at least one QuickTime event, however. There was one QuickTime event where I was escaping some big scary monsters underwater in a vehicle, and I kinda had a big grin on my face during that sequence just because it looked so cool. It was just really cool. The QuickTime events did at least offer a nice little change of pace, something to mix it up between the battles and the long story cutscenes. One thing I have to mention about the game, which is typical of JRPGs and could be both seen as a positive or a negative, depending on who you are, is that the story is told in a very long-winded fashion. So there are very long cutscenes, very long periods of not really doing much other than watching cinematic cutscenes where your characters are interacting and resolving dramatic situations.
I must agree with King Tolton. The completion
And
of Grand Staff will
they were
be
a bit
the
hit and miss for me.
culmination of all our years
Maybe it's just because I'm a
harnessing
very
magic to
cynical,
advance our
cold-hearted person,
civilizations.
but
Its loss
the
would be
relationships of these
tragic for us
characters
all.
didn't
You had to use a lot of magic energy.
they didn't do a ton for me. They didn't make me cry, despite the themes of the game being very sappy and focused on family and relationships and saving loved ones.
Embarrassing, actually. I don't want to remember that.
Yeah, I'm just more of a gameplay purist. I'm more interested in a game's gameplay. What do I spend my time doing when I'm actively playing the game? That's what I want a video game to do. Engage me with interactivity.
Dear old Queen Ming.
It's an honor to meet you.
That said,
Please.
I do have to compliment the cutscenes and the cinematics and the voice acting of the characters. Voice acting was really top-notch. The characters are quirky and charming and endearing. And they'll probably grow on you by the end of the game if you stick with it. A couple characters are children, And I'm not a fan of children characters in games. They usually annoy me, but these were less annoying than most child characters, I'll say. There was one aspect of the storytelling of this game, though, that really grated on me, and it was the memories. So, the immortal characters, Kaim in particular, as they're going through the game, sometimes memories can be triggered by just random little things. Kaim can see a flock of birds and go blank and just stare into space for 5-10 minutes while he's reliving a memory from his immortal life. And for you, the gamer, what this means is the beginning of a visual novel-styled section of story where you're just reading lots of text about some random thing that happened in Kaim's life. And I just, for the life of me, couldn't figure out how or why I was supposed to care about these memories. Because they seemed like weird little short stories. Like they would have fit together great in an anthology of short stories. They weren't really essential in my eyes to the storytelling. Maybe they make you care about the characters a little more, get to know them a little more, but too drawn out for a video game. So I experienced one or two of those visual novel memory sequences and skipped everyone after that. And the good thing to report is, if you want to skip them, you can skip them and still enjoy the game and still kind of get the gist of the story. I did. I'm reporting that I did. It worked. So I could point to one specific thing in the game that made me not care so much about its characters and themes. Just one little petty thing. Skip ahead 20-30 seconds if you don't want any type of information about Kaim and his background, but it's a pretty mild spoiler. So, Kaim has a romantic interest in the game. He does, as game characters sometimes do. Yet, it came out at one point in the story as I was playing that during his immortal life, he's had multiple mortal lovers. Yeah, multiple. And they came and went in his immortal life, and he had apparently some kids with him. We don't know how many. He could have just hundreds of kids running around, roaming around this game world, and we wouldn't know. He wouldn't know. And I just couldn't stop thinking about that. Whenever he was spending time with his love interest in the game, I was like, is she thinking about that? So the characters and story were kind of cheesy at times, but that's very par for the course for a JRPG. Think Final Fantasy games, there's always a good mix of comedy and serious moments, and that's very much the case here. Expect a tone that is balanced with drama and fun zaniness. There's just a good mix of everything, so that you never get too sick of any one emotion in the story. Characters are a little uncanny at times, a little awkward, but it just adds to the charm. It always does in these old JRPGs to me. So I want to make a note about game length. It's a pretty typical length JRPG. I think it probably takes about 50 to 60 hours to beat if you're just kind of going through it quickly and not doing any extra stuff at the end. But I spent a good 20-30 hours at the end just doing optional post-game stuff to get extra abilities and visit locations on the world map that I couldn't have visited before then. Just for fun. In the audio department, I have pretty much only praise for this game. The music is outstanding. It's no Nobuo Uematsu, so you know what to expect if you're familiar with any of his works. Fantastic music, sets the mood perfectly, and the voice acting, stellar. Even if the characters didn't always connect with me and I didn't always care about them, that deeply, I can still recognize superb voice acting where it is, and it's here. Definitely.
Oh, your muscles
Yeah,
are
well-
so...
So that's Lost Odyssey. The game didn't hook me right away. I have to admit, when the game started out and I was experiencing the lack of an overworld and the bloated story and the sappy characters I didn't always relate to and the long visual novel style memory sequences, I wasn't seeing a lot to make me fall in love with the game. But as I kept playing, more of the unique features about it started to stand out in a positive light. And the quirky characters grew on me more and more. And the gameplay systems, with the focus on mortality versus immortality and how that changes the abilities of the different characters, I thought that was very interesting. And it kept things refreshing and different, even though this is a very traditional turn-based JRPG. One would think by 2008, turn-based JRPGs had been done to death, and what new could be done? But Lost Odyssey does enough new, and keeps enough the same, to provide a great experience. I'd recommend giving it a play. I do have to warn people who intend to play this game from its 4 discs on an Xbox 360 console, like I did. That's just my thing. I like to play games on their original consoles. Beware of Disc 4 of this game. I discovered firsthand that many copies of Disc 4, this one, do not run well due to being packaged in weird little paper envelopes. The game was shipped in these cases that only have room for 3 discs. And apparently that did something to the 4th disc and made it not run well. And the weird thing is, apparently you fixed that by boiling the disc. I know, I didn't believe it either, but I boiled this disc like pasta. I boiled it for like 3 minutes, and that made it able to be played. I don't know.